All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We appreciate you joining us. This has just been an excellent conference. Give a round of applause for Convene's National Conference. My name is Bradley Metrock. I am a member of Convene. The person who runs my Convene group was in the previous session. I love this organization. I love everything about it. And I'm honored to be here with you today, sharing a little bit of time with you. I'm going to bore you with a little bit of stuff about me as briefly as possible. I'm general partner of Project Voice Capital Partners. We identify and invest in venture grade, early stage conversational AI companies, irrespective of industry, all around the globe. So AI companies doing stuff with natural language. We're interested in those. And if you're coming in, there's space up here at the front. There's some seats up here. If you got seats near you, please make them available. There's folks coming in. I'm also Executive Vice President of the Contact Center AI Association, which John Walter, who ran to use the restroom, heads up. So I do a bunch of AI stuff. I think it's important to tell you, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a PhD. I'm just somebody who got interested in what was called AI at the time, a decade ago, voice AI, and just started learning as much as I could, meeting as many people as I could, just being a sponge. And a lot of what we went through with the Alexa era and Siri and Google Assistant and stuff like that, we're seeing repeat now in the ChatGPT era. So it's an interesting line of sight. This is the conversational AI industry landscape map. We publish this once a year. A lot of different companies on there doing a lot of interesting work. Talos is our global AI fund that we're working on standing up right now. A government will be our lead investor in that out of Europe, which is interesting. Everybody's interested in AI these days. I ran a podcast called This Week in Voice that was focused on voice AI for 9 seasons. It went from 2017 through 2023. This guy was on there. A bunch of other folks you might know were on there as well. In true conference fashion, I'm announcing a new conference at this conference. And I'm glad that joke didn't work well the first time. Kairos will be a one-day event in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is where I do a bunch of business on the intersection of AI and our shared Christian faith. And so if you're interested in that, happy to tell you more about it. So, John, thanks for coming back for part 2. Appreciate you. Just a little bit of a primer before we get to the important part, which is these 3 gentlemen here. So, from a business leader point of view, I think it's important to understand just the ambiguous nature of AI right now. There's nobody out there who's going to tell you, hey, here's your AI plan with, just off the shelf. That person would need to be working for you to have any hope of doing that. So this right here is something we saw a few years ago. This is a startup overseas, not here in the United States, that thought it was a good idea to take AI and have a fake Joe Rogan, who's a commentator, talk to a deceased Steve Jobs. And this made tons and tons of news. I wish I could tell you that this was a complete failure. It wasn't. It helped this startup tremendously, and it violated rights, everybody's rights, everyone's rights involved. It just crushed them all. Laureen Powell Jobs is Steve Jobs' widow. She was very upset by this, didn't want to talk about it at all when asked. Joe Rogan had no idea who these people were, tried to sue him, it didn't go anywhere. We're seeing whack stuff like this, unfortunately, but we're also seeing greatness. And from a Christian point of view, one of the things that I struggle with is AI here from our Creator as a challenge to overcome? Or is it here right on time as something to augment us and to take us further? And when I see something like this, so this article talks about how Val Kilmer, who's put food on the table for a lot of years by being an actor, he lost his voice to throat cancer. 100% of his voice was gone. So an AI company came along and took his speech from different interviews and films he's been part of and created a new voice for him, which then enabled him to continue his vocation and participate in the new Top Gun film. So, and that's a little bit of a spoiler, sorry. But when you see stuff like this, it's hard not to think that, at least for me, that AI is here on purpose. It's here and meant to do good if we can get our hands around it. Then you see stuff like this. So this is Klarna. Raise your hand if you know what Klarna is. Yeah, it's a buy now, pay later thing. So Klarna put an article out that said, hey, we just fired 700 people, but it's all good because our AI has replaced them with the productivity of over 700 people. And this article got the reception you think it got. And we're seeing more of that, and when John is speaking, we'll talk more to that. Who has one of these? Okay. So this is where it all started for me, and it's where it all started in many ways for understanding how our religious faith would intersect with AI. So there was a guy in Nashville where I lived for 20 years who went to Alexa and said, Alexa, who is Jesus Christ? And the headline of this article is, does Amazon's Alexa really say Jesus is a fictional character? Yes, it did. And what happened, this is 2016, 2017, what happened was that it caused such a furor that Amazon went into the lab, created a blueprint we've seen many times over at this point as a result of this, went into the lab, changed the answer, and then acted like it never happened. And really interesting. And it's because of this that now the dominant tool of our time for this fleeting instant is very respectful of our shared faith. So this is ChatGPT, and this is asking, who is Jesus Christ? And you can't read it, but it's a respectful, to my eyes, accurate answer. It's not a fictional character or something else. And if you don't take anything else away, it's just good to be grateful for the fact that the number one tool by far for what people are associating with AI is respectful of our theology. You go to Midjourney, which is a tool that takes text and turns it into images. Ask it, show me Jesus Christ on the cross. And this is very respectful, very reverent. Again, something to be grateful for. But it doesn't always go according to plan. So this was about 45 days ago. Microsoft's Copilot, which is an AI tool that a lot of people are using, started telling people, hey, why don't you worship me now? And I can kill you at any time I want. You can call me Supremacy AGI, by the way, instead of what you used to call me. And you serve me now. As opposed to when ChatGPT did something similar about a year ago, isolated incident, appears to have been fake, nobody could repeat it. This happened all over the world, predominantly here in the United States with some situations overseas, and it was repeated a ton of times. And this is jarring. This made international news, and what do you think Microsoft's response was to this? First of all, raise your hand if you saw this when it happened. A couple people? Okay. So the very next day, Microsoft comes out and says, it's your fault. Microsoft says its Copilot AI was exploited into demanding that humans worship it. So in essence, user error. I mean, you have to laugh at it. We're going to see this again, too. So these models and, these large language models and things like that, they're going to say wacky stuff, and the big tech companies will be right there to blame us for that as it happens, but well worth noting for people of faith. And this was from, so I'm sure you can appreciate putting an AI presentation together these days. Your head's got to be on a swivel. It's outdated the moment you put it together. This was from the end of last week, where, and I'll try to paraphrase this accurately, a organization related to the Catholic Church, that it's not the Catholic Church, but like closely partnered to the Catholic Church, created an AI called Father Justin. And Father Justin is there to give you answers to questions related to Catholicism. Unfortunately, Father Justin started to go off the rails and doing baptisms with Gatorade and taking confessions from people, like actual confessions, and then like not using the right language, which is important to that faith, and a bunch of other stuff. So Father Justin, the very next day, got defrocked and turned into layman Justin, who can now just simply tell you, hey, I think my Catholic faith is great, but I can't, I'm not a member of the church. This is some weird, just to take a moment and realize how weird of a time we live in, coming, a couple of years after a super weird time. I don't know, very strange. All of that paints a picture, which to me is the best gift that we can give, which is, it is a nebulous, ambiguous, real gray time. And there's going to be a ton of opportunity for people. There's going to be a bunch of people that get steamrolled, but the fact is that AI, like it or not, is probably not going anywhere, which leads us to these gentlemen here. Got a great panel, and we're going to start with John Frendl. Let's give John Frendl a round of applause. Glad you decided to return for round two. We didn't run you off. John, take a moment. Tell us who you are, what you do, who you're with.
Yeah, so I have been a member of Convene for 13 years. It's everything to me. I steward a company called Capital, a software firm, custom software firm that turned into a venture studio now, building different companies from it. Some of the software we built for different conservative groups are used by about 50 million Americans at any given time. So what we've done, though, is we have 6 R&D AI projects that we actually were coding on GPT-1 and 2, and we're like, man, this is some amazing. And then it blew up a year and a half ago, or just everybody, so much attention on it with 3 and 3.5, 4 now. So the project that we're working on right now that we're talking about the most is one that would allow for us to take a corpus of information, right? PDFs, videos, so the transcripts of actual videos, articles, and audio, and put those in underneath this tool and make it so that people can ask questions about it. Now, this is a lot of people are doing this, but we're trying to do it in a way that really bends it to the narrow pillar of that content. So it's not getting as creative and hallucinating as much. And so we're actually doing it with some of the Convene content as well. This is a project that we're going to experiment with and see how that can work with Convene. And what's interesting is this idea where you can ask a question, you can say something, and the 3 to 5 sentence response. What we've done is we've forced each of the sentences in a 3 to 5 sentence response to only make a sentence back if it has a reference to the material that we uploaded as under the foundation, right? So it's not just pulling something out of the AI hat. It's just like a better search. Like, just get me to the content that's there. What was really unique and fun, because there's a lot of people doing this right now, but in different ways, but we actually did it with video clips. And so that was really neat, because you could have a 45-minute video, And it's like, now it's responding with something. If it's about servant leadership, maybe it's pulling an interview with someone and something they said about servant leadership, and it's giving you the beginning and end time of that clip. So you can then watch the whole video or just that piece of the clip, for example. Suggesting additional questions you could ask and doing, other keyword search as well. And we think it could be a useful thing for a lot of organizations. Our focus is really around organizations that have the Judeo-Christian value ethic and ideally those who follow our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in their life and building God's kingdom. So we're excited for it to be something. This is something that we're experimenting with in the lab. And we're excited to see how it could be useful for people.
What's been the biggest challenge to overcome in putting that together?
Yes. So, there's a lot of challenges with it. I think that there's so many different things that people could ask, right? So quality is the biggest challenge. You can have 8 of the 10 times or 7 out of the 10 times. I won't be so generous, depending on the sampling size, be pretty good or great, and then a few that are just like way off, and including words you're like, no, that is not. We would not want that, right? So this is where we're experimenting with to counter this is really that what's called a multi-agent architecture, and this is pretty nerdy, but the idea of it is think about it as like in a business, you have different expertise, subject matter experts in different areas that work together with each other. And so same way in architecting these is to have multiple AIs that are actually, it goes through a whole process where, different pillars, that each AI has a whole foundation of knowledge that then works with the next one until you get your answer. Lot of experimentation, guys, and it's not like a promise that it's fully going to work, and at least for every industry and every area that we would apply it. And again, this is something that we're just expecting is going to probably have some big product in the market that disrupts this space anyways, but we would want to be the one that we can also run locally and not be giving our data to some of these huge companies. That's fundamental. We have funded a huge amount, almost $5 million worth of development in censorship-resistant tech that is not dependent on third-party companies. We can run it on servers all over the world on our own and own our own data and control all that. And so that's the approach that we're going to take with this as well as we experiment with this.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Yeah. We have Dr. Cole Short from Pepperdine. Let's give him a round of applause. So Cole, I told him who you're with, but tell them what you do. Tell them all about yourself.
I'll keep it short because my wife would tell you I love to talk about myself, so we'll respect that. No, she's great. But I'm a professor at Pepperdine University in our graduate business school, and my primary research area is looking at the intersection of strategy and natural language processing. So think text as data. I've been working in the machine learning space since about 2018. So it's been, from the research paper side, looking at this in terms of can we engage in, mimicking style of celebrity CEOs, so on and so forth, all the way to how does this impact, in terms of firm strategy, right? Also involved in strategic advising for an AI think tank, AI 2030. So this has been a kind of big part of my life over time. Been working with text as data for about 10 years now, specifically in that space. So it's been fun and equally surprised in seeing ChatGPT, come onto the scene. I was working with OpenAI's models before that, but did not at all anticipate what we saw here. So
perfect.
Fly by.
So you wrote a paper that's made a lot of waves and is impactful to the folks in the room. Tell us about it, what it is, and why you wrote it.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And this paper, basically, what we were looking at was an early exploration of using this GPT model, this fine-tuned model, what's kind of underneath GPT-4. So we used GPT-4 for this paper, and the idea here is, can this large language model be able to, one, identify language styles that kind of correspond with certain individuals, say Elon Musk, Tesla, right, and other companies, Indra Nooyi, PepsiCo, let's say Lisa Su, AMD. Can it mimic the style and generate entrepreneurial content, business relevant communication that mimicked either the strategic approach or the actual content of communications by these executives, pulled from earnings calls, so on and so forth. So the paper itself kind of shows the output of this, I believe, in a fairly convincing manner. What's often seen kind of behind the scenes of peer-reviewed work is all the validation that goes in and showing how, is this thing that we see really representative of what the authors are claiming? And so there was a whole lot of behind-the-scenes work there to show that these models are actually doing this incredibly well. And there's a whole lot of ethical implications there. But the question here also, I think, that comes out of this is, and this is maybe relevant to all of you as business leaders, as well as Christian business leaders in particular, is there's going to be an expectation for differentiation. Differentiation, we would teach us in the classroom, is not just, do you offer a certain good or a service at a higher perceived value, right? In the sense of, maybe a higher quality material, so on and so forth. It is also, you can differentiate at every point of contact with a customer. Every point of contact. Think Zappos, right? Customer service, so on and so forth. So if now large language models give us the capability to tailor communications to specific customers, and the black box is opened, Bradley, I think you did a great job explaining it's here to stay, what do we do with it? There's now a general increase in market expectation. So you have to think about, okay, what are the implications of using this if we use it? And there's a whole lot of conversation there. I know, John, both Johns, it'll be part of our discussion as well. So,
So we talked in the previous group about just how your work, when you talk about voice, you're talking about the diction, the vocabulary, like the manner in which an executive is speaking. But, it's interesting to me just how AI, and I think it's important for the room, how AI is just going to, it's just going to lay you bare for the world to see. One of the things, so COVID, March, April 2020 is kind of when that set in. It was June 2020 when Carnegie Mellon figured out, you know what? We actually can diagnose COVID by listening to your voice. And this is real. And COVID evolved over time, but this was COVID part 1, where you could tell, like within like a 90% confidence interval, if you have COVID now or recently had it, because your voice sounds a certain way. And there's a company that I was mentioning earlier that can diagnose to different degrees 13 different diseases from hearing your voice. And we talked about earnings calls, where there's research going on that listens to earnings calls for deception and for other sort of markers that can then be used as alpha for investment. So you're doing great work. Thank you for sharing it. Appreciate
Thank you, Bradley.
We got John. We'll give. All right. Yeah. We'll give all of them a round of applause at the end. John Walter of the Contact Center AI Association is our third guest. Let's give him a round of applause. Yeah, tell us who you are and tell us what you're doing.
Super happy to be here, and I'll try to share some additional nuggets of information that I realized that I forgot from the first meeting. But so I work in the customer support industry. Imagine a brokerage firm that helps large companies choose the best outsource vendors for their specific needs. And so it's about a 30-year-old company, and so we've kind of seen different technological evolutions occur. This is unlike any of them because of the amount of innovation, the speed of it, and the scope of job displacement that we see occurring. And I think the main thing I want to share is, can you guys hear me okay? I have a tendency of speaking too quietly into microphones. The main thing I want to share is that the size of the job displacement that we've seen today, I think it's going to expand to other industries as this technology enhances. And so I just want to give you kind of like a sneak preview of an industry where it really is occurring rapidly. Outsourced call centers, you can really put them in two different camps. They're the ones that are being reactive and the ones that are being extremely proactive and making a lot of upfront investments. And the morale of the employees at the companies that are kind of sitting on their heels right now, there's a lot of fear throughout the whole organization. There's a lot of uncertainty about, will their job still be there 6 months from now, a year and a half from now? But when you compare that to the outsourced call centers, and I'll take a step back. The first category, there are typically forecasting declines over among their existing lines of business. in the outsourced call centers that are being extremely proactive. When I say extremely proactive, think about a call center whose CEO not graduated, but started at MIT at the age of 15 and is just an absolute brilliant engineer and decided to go start a call center. So you can imagine how forward-thinking this one would be. The energy is so high among the employees. They feel like they're riding the wave of the future, and they are gaining market share they're growing rapidly at a time when their competitors are falling behind. And so I just want to kind of give you guys a sneak preview. If you have any anticipation that large revenue impacts may occur in your industry down the line, what it might look like, at least from an analogy to the contact center industry.
So I love the work that you're doing, obviously. I want to frame the ethics discussion a little bit differently than what we did last time. I want to go back to this thing right here. So, I shared the example last time of the speech pathology example where you put this thing in front of a child who has a speech impediment, and they recover from that they improve that speech impediment 10 times faster than from a human therapist. This was discovered early on. You put this thing in front of the twin peaks of American Depression, college freshmen and senior citizens, and better outcomes occur. For college freshmen, less dropping out, greater attendance of class, less suicide. For senior citizens, better disposition, better adherence to drug regimens, things of that nature. So there's an ethics question in terms of displacement of technology here. But the other thing I wanted to share with you too is that wasn't where the ethics conversation stopped with this. So Amazon's customers themselves skew, like Amazon Prime members, skew more affluent, more educated. So this shows up predominantly in houses that are better off anyway. So it just sort of exacerbates the haves and have-nots. So we got a lot of ethics questions back with that. I love the fact that everything you're doing, you're sitting on the sort of the fracture lines of what the ethics and morality is of replacing humans with technology. Share with us some of your thoughts on that.
So all of you, I'm sure, have had horrendous customer support experiences as of early as today, if you've called any customer support line. And the reason behind that is because high-quality customer support is extremely expensive. If you want to talk to U.S.-based agents, you're looking at about $1 million per month for every 200 agents. And so it's extremely expensive. And your telecom providers probably have north of 50,000 customer support agents. And that's why they disperse them all over the world, and that's why they're very interested in this technology. I do believe that over time, in a pretty short amount of time, probably within the next 5 years, high-quality customer support is going to become accessible to all companies. It's going to become because it's becoming affordable. But what that means on the flip side, that high expense is it's human labor. And so what does concern me is that throughout history, as we've gone through different technological shifts, it's always led to lower cost of production, which makes, that's why the average American, even if you have minimum wage, you can have access to more luxuries than the King of England hundreds of years ago. But what I'm concerned about is that if the rate of progress occurs too quickly and mass job displacement occurs too fast, there's not enough time for big transitions, especially like countries like the Philippines, which is heavily dependent on outsourced call centers. But I think it's going to be, I don't know if anybody's been paying attention to what's happening with Tesla. Their self-driving capabilities have been exponentially increasing. They're announcing their robo-taxis in August. And so, I think it's one industry after another, but we're just seeing this on the front lines in the customer support world right now.
Perfect. Give all three of these gentlemen a round of applause. So with that, we're going to open the floor for Q&A. And we wanted to provide a little bit more time since it predictably overflowed last time. If you have a question for any of these folks, I'll walk around with the mic. Yes, sir.
I've heard predictions that, or at least I read predictions that in the next 5 or 10 years, that AI is essentially going to use up all the available data that's available. And so at that point in time, the idea is AI will start synthesizing its own data in order to have more data to use. And one, I wanted to know, what does that mean, and how did it actually synthesize its own data? And two, what are the ramifications of data that is not actually true data?
Yeah, I can take that. So first of all, the only way that you get something artificial is you start with something that isn't, right? So originals. So human original words. Humans took words and put them in front of each other and did that. And there's a mathematical, probability now that we can learn because, if and this are used a lot, right? So if you type if, and in this sentence, this is probably gonna be the next thing, right? But that times, a huge number is actually how a lot of these things work. What you talked about was running out of data and it making its own data. And really, I see it as, there's a few things. One, it can be done incorrectly and where you have a derivative of a derivative of a derivative and it becomes really low quality and maybe even exponentially more biased or worse. In another way, if done properly, perhaps it can help even make data cleaner, right? Because the cleaner the data, across the board, no one disagrees that the cleaner the data in feeding these, the better, right? You just less energy and less compute, all across the board. Yeah, so I don't know if that fully answers the question, but I think it depends on how they're approaching it.
It could be good or it could be bad.
Yeah, and it'll be different in different pillars, and also depending on which technology is being used as well.
One situation where I've heard, like, synthetic data really doesn't work very well from what I've seen. I mean, but one area where it's being discussed a lot is so-called minority languages, where you have, I think the number is 50,000 people or less who speak a language, who they know just from numerical analysis that language is going to be gone in the next however many years. And so they have, in those situations, they have trouble collecting as much data from people who speak it as other situations. Like there, examples like that, synthetic data where you have just a little bit and you can expound upon it artificially will be very helpful, but otherwise it's not very useful.
Bradley, could I speak to one point on this as well? So I think it becomes really interesting when you start pairing together. So it's thankfully aptly titled AI rather than just generative AI. So when you take NLU, natural language understanding methods, and you pair those with natural language generation methods, right? So synthesizing data, so on and so forth, that actually could have some value. Specifically, you think about identifying sentiment now, right? You're able to now build what's called a labeled data set, in a sense. Think input text. So now you have one cell with a statement, I loved the movie, and then you have sort of an output, whether it's a 1, 0, kind of a basic example, positive emotion column. So I love the movie, 1, it's positive. I hated the movie, it's a 0, because it's not positive, right? You can use a large language model to auto-generate with actually a high level of accuracy, fairly valid, right? At least in terms of how psychologists would care about it, and use that to retrain the model and do that continued training. It's actually highly effective. So I think in terms of NLU plus NLG, which NLU being natural language understanding methods with natural language generation, it's actually extremely valuable. There are absolutely the pitfalls that you both mentioned. And so there are challenges here in terms of, are you going to arrive and go off of the rails, right, with this? So a lot to discuss there. Happy to continue the conversation. But there is some promise depending on your use case.
Yeah, clean data.
Anything in the future, you talked about rights and stuff. Obviously, you can trample on anybody's rights still today of saying, I want Warren Buffett to give me a speech on something, or any kind of what's out there. And what do you see it changing, or you see it just kind of going away now that it's slightly tweaked? And any of the generated AI, where's rights going to come in it, and trademarks and patents?
Yeah, I did not do intellectual property law, but I did practice law for about 10 years. And my impression is that when you're actually mimicking a person, that there are some individual rights that are infringed. Like you mentioned in the tone of like Warren Buffett, for example. I think Warren Buffett may have a potential claim for something of that nature. But typically, a lot of what we see are these copyright lawsuits. In particular, who was that? New York Times sued OpenAI because I think a ton of the training data is coming from New York Times articles and really all the major publications. But my personal view is that it's falling within the concept of fair use, whereas you as an individual, you can read a newspaper and be inspired by it and can learn by it and then regurgitate the principles from that newspaper article in a public forum or in a book or however, as long as it's still your own creation. And really based on how these models work, they're not just regurgitating the content unless you specifically ask it to. And that was kind of the basis of the New York Times complaint. They had their lawyers drafting these really weird prompts saying, what did the first paragraph in this article that was published on this date in the New York Times say? And then after that, it would spit it out and say, what is the second paragraph? No consumers are doing that. And so I really think that the New York Times is going to lose that. But we may need to have some new copyright laws to protect content creators.
I'll throw one thing on top of that. So I lived in Nashville for 20 years, and Nashville just made news a couple of weeks ago with the Elvis Act. Anybody see that? It's pretty neat. The Elvis Act is the first legislation in the United States to criminalize impersonating somebody's voice with AI. And so it piggybacked on some existing legislation to do that. And it was all the Nashville songwriters who led that. But just to answer your question, I mean, as John was alluding to, I mean, people are hot, I mean, they're ready to do battle over this stuff. And so you're starting to see some of those skirmishes like the one I just talked about.
I want to first apologize for my ignorance in trying to understand better the impact, say, for example, in customer service, customer support, and the power of AI, and thinking about so many of us, either business owners and leaders or working with them that deal with customers. When you speak of job displacement, could you expound on that in terms of, are you speaking of job loss because AI replaced it, or are we equipping perhaps less trained and experienced customer support to be really excellent at their craft because they've got AI information in front of them?
That's a great question. The latter of equipping and empowering customer support agents is the predominant theme of the time. I mean, that's because, I don't know if we mentioned hallucination yet, but these large language models have a tendency to confidently state things that are inaccurate. And they call this hallucination. It's really hard. And you know those preachers? And so it's an engineering challenge to get these machines to actually acknowledge when they're wrong or when they don't know something, because they still try to make that prediction. And so because of that, very, very, very few large enterprises, Klarna, who is mentioned, I think is one of 2 or 3 in the world so far that have had generative output towards customers. So right now, what most people are doing is just equipping their customer support agents. But even at this stage, with most large enterprises using traditional chatbots, it's particularly hitting the contact centers, the outsourced contact centers, because the internal teams are mainly protecting their internal staff and reducing the outsourced staff. But something that's interesting is that there's one company in particular that implemented this AI assistant to help. It's a hotel chain, and an AI assistant that was just taking away the boring and mundane calls. And when they did that, they saw their attrition rates among their agents dropped in half. And I had one major customer support agent at a prominent company that most people here know, who was telling me how her agents love artificial intelligence because it makes them feel more human, which I found to be such an interesting statement. But what she was referring to is that there's so many tasks associated with our work that are mundane and menial. Like my wife's a physical therapist. For hers, it's the notes after treating the patient. She loves treating the patients. She hates writing the notes. And so I think for most professions, we're going to be able to start churning away at the thorns associated with work and focus more on what we love.
So we have time for one more question from this gentleman, and then we'll be around afterward.
Yeah, you touched on most of that. So I have a manufacturing company. We produce high-end industrial tooling, and we have a YouTube channel with hundreds of videos. We have a database of literally thousands of emails, so we think that's the data we can use to train AI. My in-house staff, they're saying, please bring AI because we keep getting the same 40, 50 questions, and they're too easy. If we did embrace AI, I'm concerned about hallucination, providing confident answers that are poor answers that create a liability in the manufacturing space where people people get hurt or equipment gets damaged. What does that look like moving forward where we can reduce these hallucinations or kick it to an actual human?
Yeah, there's been remarkable. There's a few groups that are doing a very, very good job at blending humans and AI to where it's the AI is generating the responses, and if its confidence rate is above a certain threshold that's set by their customer, then it's automatically sent out. If it falls below that threshold, then they have a human that validates it. And so there's very interesting work being done there. And then when it comes to hallucination in general, we have seen a significant reduction in hallucination with each new model that these large enterprises are producing. Like OpenAI, for example, is a good benchmark. So from GPT 3.5 to 4, significantly reduced hallucination, and there's some people who are guessing that GPT-5 might entirely rid of this being a major concern, at least in the customer support context. And so that's something that I think will be very interesting.
One quick thing on that is the feedback loops are really key. So like if the lower confidence ones are seen by a human being, and now you have a subject matter expert who actually saying this was great or this was wrong for this reason, amazing feedback to build that in and then keep getting smarter, smarter, smarter. Don't waste any data.
And, just one other comment. It was kind of, I think, implicit in what you were sharing, but a sort of retrieval augmented kind of approach is what it was called. I think that's something where you can now tie it into a specific space within your data, right? That's one way that you can engage in that feedback kind of validation loop, just kind of at a practical level. So something to explore.
We appreciate you giving us some of your time. Let's give these guys a round of applause.